there may be some people who are going to hop on in a minute or two, which is no big deal. We are going to talk about today frequency and dosage and FAB scheduling, which stands for flexible activity-based. Going through those two things, we're only going to be meeting for an hour today, and definitely understand that this may be a conversation that we continue down the road. But for those of you who were able to see Dathan and Melissa in December, this topic was discussed as part of their fidelity discussion that centered around the PSP model. And then there was also a training for KDEC, which was one of their pre-sessions. And Melissa spent almost an entire day talking about fidelity related to scheduling and dosage, frequency, different aspects like that. So before we get started, I wanted to take a quick poll to see kind of where we were about the important things in life, because this has been a really hard week already with lots of things happening. So I feel like sometimes we just need to go back to what is truly important, which is the office. Really, it's the office. So I couldn't put everybody on, but curious to see where we're at with our favorites.
I have an important question. How do you just choose one?
You can't, but for the purposes of the poll, you know, okay, you're gonna have to. Kelly picks Creed is awesome when he wants to do a cartwheel. That's one of my favorite episodes. So it's kind of looking like not quite 75% of us. Michael Scott, Jim, someone doesn't care. I did make this anonymous because I figured someone would pick that, so I don't know who that was. So I'm sorry you work here. I apologize. I do like the office. All right, I'm gonna pull up the PowerPoint and share it with you guys. I did make a super boring PowerPoint, but with the idea that the information really was just going to keep us on track for the things that I wanted to talk about and discuss today. We are going to attempt to get through, oh, hold on. We're going to attempt to get through a couple different things today. We're going to attempt to go through and review our mission and key principles, because those are the foundation of how and why we provide services. We're going to talk briefly about the 5 parts of a home visit, because this really leads us into the end of a visit when you're creating the joint plan with the family on when you're going to come back next, and that can roll us into the FAB scheduling discussion. We'll talk about advantages and challenges to doing FAB scheduling. I know not everybody's doing it, and I'm not here today to tell you that this is what we're going to be doing. I just want to share more information with you. We'll also spend some time talking about frequency and dosage of early intervention services. This is going to be different information than what we heard 10 or 15 years ago when we first transitioned. We know a little bit more now. We've been able to take more data. They've really been looking at programs across the nation. So again, little disclaimer, for those of us who were trained back in 2009, 2010, again, this is going to be different. I'm not saying this is how we're going to do it, but I do want to share the most up-to-date information if you weren't able to join in December or February with Dathan and Melissa. And then we're also going to talk about when to consider utilizing bursts of service. In the past, they were called front loading, but what they found is that when it's referred to as front loading, we tend to think that that only happens at the beginning of services at the initial IFSP. and people weren't utilizing front loading at different points throughout the child's career with early intervention. So now they're changing that term to be bursts of service, which indicates that can happen at any point in time while the child has an IFSP. So just some little little ditties there. Again, my disclaimer, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we all, we sat in a barn and we learned about early intervention. And we had a lot of questions about PSP. You guys really have done a fantastic job. Those of you who've been doing it since infant toddler rolled into it. The state of Kansas has been doing the PSP model since about the year 2000. Johnson County started doing it in 2009 or 2010, but I feel like that the progress we've made in the last 10 years has been fantastic. You guys really just embrace the ideas. Again, you embrace the mission and key principles, which really revolve around teaching the child and teaching the family within what they're already doing during the day, involving the caregivers, the idea that all parents have an impact on their child's learning and development with necessary resources and supports. And I think that's, again, where the individualized part of it comes up. Obviously, our primary role is really to work with those family members and caregivers, so that does look a little bit different than a clinic-based setting, because you're not in the home when that happens. And then obviously everything that we do, we want to make sure that we're basing it on available research, relevant laws and regulations that revolve around IDEA, which is the federal law that our program is under, and then also making sure that we have validated practices too. I had asked Stacy, I can't, with me sharing the slideshow, I can't see the chat box. So if you guys have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box and Stacy is going to read them out loud. So stop me at any time, ask questions. I just can't see, so I am not going to be able to address those, but Stacy is going to be my right-hand man. So thinking about, we're going to dive right in, thinking about the joint, thinking about your home visit. When we look at the home visit, you can divide it up into basically 5 different sections. The first section talks about, what happened between the previous visit and your current visit. And Melissa, I think, had a really good statement that if we could move away from asking, so how have things been going? So how have you been? If we could get away from asking that really general question at the start of a visit, we know better, we had a joint plan in place, being more specific about and mindful and meaningful about how you guys are engaging that session. She had given the example of, our plan from last time was, for you, Mom, to work on pointing to pictures during, reading a book before nap time. What did you learn about that? How did that go? So you're asking a specific question about that joint plan, and you're not opening it up to, well, how have you been? How are things going? What's new? What's happened new since I've been here last? And so really, tailoring your early intervention plan and that home visit to look like it's specific and it's targeted and really helps you stay on track with families. I don't know how easy or how difficult, truthfully, this is. If you guys, if you've got input, if you've got a different way you're asking that question that helps address the joint plan, again, please post that in the chat box so we can support and learn from one another as we move along. Ideally, that joint plan discussion, that reflection, that feedback lasts about 10 minutes, if you think about a 60-minute home visit. And then transitioning into whatever that activity was that you guys decided and planned on for you to be there. What I've noticed, and you guys may have as well, they've really moved away from talking about routines in terms of joining a family during a routine, and they're talking about activities, which implies you're joining that family during something specific, whether it is playtime or whether that is, bath time, whether that is, watching the family put the kiddo in the car, which is just a total disaster for different reasons. So you're joining during a specific activity versus a general routine. So you're going to hear that terminology, I think, a lot more moving forward in regards to continuing education, things like that with early intervention. One of the pieces that they talked about too is you transition into that next role where you're, that this is a majority of your chunk of time. You're observing the parent and the child interacting during that activity. If you don't know what that looks like for the family, how are we going to know what to do, what to coach, what questions to ask? And so Dathan, who is a speech language pathologist, had written an article that appeared in the ASHA Leader, ASHA Journal, which is our publication for speech pathologists. And the title of it was literally couching, versus coaching. And coaching involves that observation of the parent and the child interacting, whereas couching is just talking. And you don't know what that looks like. And so that becomes difficult, I think, for you then to step in and support that family. But thinking about the second chunk of your home visit, you've got your observation, you've got your action. So this is where you may do some modeling. You may do, some discussion about, development. You may, physically need to get up and move to a different location in the house. This is where, again, that meat of the visit happens in combination with your reflection and feedback. One of the things when we took a poll looking at what you guys wanted to talk about in regards to fidelity, the number one thing that you guys identified you wanted more discussion and support and training around was reflective questioning. So please know that is our next fidelity-based lunch and learn. We'll talk about that a little bit more. I think one of the key pieces I've learned, not only from observing you guys, but also from doing coaching logs with our staff who've been doing them up until COVID, was asking one question at a time and then wait for that family to come up with an answer. Sometimes we ask a question and then we load it and we load it again. And so really thinking about what our facilitators are mindful of doing right now with our Zoom meetings is wait time and pause time. We know too, based on our recent factions training, some of us process quickly, some of us process slowly. And I think that allowing families time to think about that question that you've asked them, you guys are going to get more authentic answers. So that would be one thing I definitely would recommend is ask one question at a time. And then also think about your loaded questions. Like they always joke around, when you're, questioning a witness on the stand, you can't ask leading questions. The judge won't let you. So think about that when you're talking with your families too. Think about the difference in the question. Why do you think he did that? Maybe because he's tired versus why do you think he did that? And then letting the parent answer that. So a lot of times we probably know the answer. We think we know, but again, let's really, ask that question and let the family get to that answer on their own. And it might take them a little longer than us get her done people would like, but that's just something that we need to work through on our own. So, really thinking about that, but, again, acknowledging that this is a definite area of growth that I think probably over 80% of the staff who responded to that survey really want more help and support and guidance on. So please know, that's something we want to do for you guys as well.
Monica.
And the last part of your home visit is creating that joint plan. So thinking about.
Sorry, this is Stacy. There's a question.
Yes, go for it.
Unless you want to wait till you get to the end of this slide, and I actually have this question too. And this is a question from Teresa, and she's saying she's asking about the joint plan, but right now, especially, she feels like it's sometimes more appropriate to ask just in general, how's it going? So I often ask the question regarding the family in this current constantly changing environment to learn of any impact of COVID on the family since the last visit also. And I was thinking the same thing. Just sometimes it feels better for a relationship development or whatever to ask that more general question to start out before you dive into what was that joint plan from last time.
I think that's a great comment, a great question. And I think too, those are definitely pieces that I would say probably, not that they're not important questions with that checking in with where families are, but with all that's going on now and the length of time it has been, I do feel like, that casual conversation question starter is definitely important. Again, thinking about when you're ready to dive into your visit, then maybe dialing in a little bit and asking that more specific question about the joint plan, which does kind of signify, okay, now we're ready to jump in. So yeah, I mean, by no means does that mean don't be friendly with families. I think the idea is that that's the start of your therapy, like that's the start of that session. And it helps that family kind of regroup. Again, knowing that that's our focus and that's what we want to do, but also knowing lots of stuff comes up in between visits. And what was important 2 weeks ago, I mean, let's be honest, what was important 2 days ago is even now drastically different than what it was, just due to life. So absolutely. And again, making that judgment call, I just know I'm fully supportive of that.
And then Mary Ellen has a question. An important piece of not using a leading question is to give us insight into reflection with the family and to know where they are in their reflection.
I think it was more of a statement.
Right.
I think that's an absolutely great thing to think about. One of the pieces to Mary Ellen, and you were helping me with meeting with, the staff that had started over the last, 2 or 3 years when we were reviewing coach logs, looking at that reflective questioning sheet and identifying what types of questions you're asking. I think that too gives you a lot of insight on where that family is and maybe where you need to kind of help guide them with the types of questions you're asking. So yeah, I think that asking that more open-ended question, it allows that family, like you said, to share their insights and their reflection on kind of where they are with processing things. Any other questions, Stacy?
That looks like it for now, yeah.
Okay. And then thinking about the creation of that joint plan, and again, this is kind of where we dive into the meat of our meeting today, talking about FAB scheduling. So, what is the family? What was their takeaway from your visit? What do they want to practice, and when will they practice it? I think that's the other piece that helps us outline and helps families, remember kind of what they're supposed to do. So not just, we're going to practice reading stories, but when is that going to take place? What does that look like? For those of you who've taken Hannon, which would be our SLPs, and then our ECS, some of our ECSEs, and I believe Hannah had taken a training as well. They talk a lot about adult learning style, and I think that that's an important piece too. What is the best way for that family to remember that joint plan? I don't know if you guys can share in the chat box, what you found, how are families requesting that information? Is it email? Is it reminders and phones? Is it sending copies of the home visit note? Like a lot of ways. But I think again, asking that family, how do they want to remember that plan and what they're going to be working on? then thinking about when you're going to join next. And this really, again, gets back to this FAB scheduling. So when you come back the next time, what activity are you going to join? And when are you going to do that? I think that a big piece of what we talk about with FAB scheduling is getting out of the living room. So not always playing, which when I did therapy, that's pretty much all I did, except for a handful of families, I think, who helped me think outside the box a little bit. But I think that that's an easy activity to fall back on. But if we want to get out of that living room, especially now, thinking about what the family does outside and joining them when it's not super duper hot, but joining them in some of those other activities that might help us pull out of that home anyway. So I tried to make this fancy. They have Zoom had, or what am I trying to say? PowerPoint has these like designer slides that they do now, which are lovely. But when I went to design this slide, it wouldn't design. I guess it didn't really want to. So anyways, the slide is super boring. What I wanted to do is just kind of get a feel for how many of you guys are again, this is anonymous. How many of you guys are currently doing FAB scheduling? How many of you are really doing block scheduling? So you've got families that you're seeing specific days of the week, specific times, and that's just the way it is. How many of you are doing a little bit of both? And how many of you have really no idea what you're doing? You're just trying to see families, which is also great. So for the most part, it's looking like everybody's trying to do FAB scheduling a little bit. Not everybody. Lots of people are trying to do FAB scheduling at some level. Some people, looks like, are just winging it. They don't know what they're doing, but they're getting visits down. So, again, for those 3 people, fantastic. I just ask that you try. That's lovely. So good. So again, I think that is, that's something that, if you guys remember, for those of you who were there, that's something that Dathan and Melissa talked about. Like, it's hard. It's not easy to transition from block scheduling, which is what a lot of us learn on the job, and transitioning to the activity-based scheduling. So, you're looking at the differences between block scheduling and the activity-based. The question I would ask you, like, what does the variety of activities look like when you're doing block scheduling versus what does that variety of activities look like when you're doing FAB scheduling? Do you guys, for those of you who are trying to do a little of both with families, are you seeing results getting in with different activities, or do you feel like you're always joining families, during playtime or during mealtime or whatever that activity or routine might be?
So Monica, while people are thinking about that, there's a couple of notes in the chat. Nadine says she screenshots her note and texts to some families, especially ones that the dad and mom are not together, so they can see what the session with the other parents look like. And if she doesn't do FAB, it's because the family's schedule needs to be a certain day or time due to work. And Teresa says, yeah, same thing. That's the reason that not all of them are FAB. And then Meredith said she loves it when a parent grabs a paper to write stuff down. And
Meredith does love her pen and paper, so I see why she would like that one.
And then Megan says she emails a copy of notes to all families, but doesn't include any PHI, so it can be emailed non-securely.
Awesome. So you guys have got some, again, thinking outside the box. Back in the old day, it was like a piece of paper, like a duplicate or something like that. And now that we've gone to electronic documentation, I think that does allow for an opportunity to be a little bit more creative. So kudos to you guys for talking with families about, you know, how they're going to remember that and what they need to do, and how you can support them in remembering what that looks like. You know, for those of you who, you know, might be struggling with that activity-based, the FAB scheduling, one of the pieces that Melissa talked about is, not only is it difficult to start, but when you look at your schedule, your next week might be pretty full with appointments, but the week after that, you're going to still have 60 to 70% of your visits open because you haven't gotten there yet. So knowing all of these things are in place, you know, thinking about that. Another piece that is really difficult is if a family cancels and you're doing FAB scheduling, when you go to reschedule that visit, you know, thinking about, okay, what was that joint plan that I was going to join, and then finding the same time that you can join that same activity from that joint plan. So again, if you have a family that you see Tuesdays at 2 and a visit gets canceled, well, you know, the next week, Tuesday at 2, you're going to see them anyway. So it's a little bit easier, I think, when you're doing block scheduling because you don't have to actively think about that, but that's really what FAB scheduling gets at, is making sure we are meeting that family with that same activity from that visit that had gotten canceled. So benefits to FAB scheduling. For those of you who are doing it, whether it's a little or a lot, what are some things that you like about FAB scheduling?
So I can just hop in, and Mary Ellen just added that she likes it because it allows for more opportunities to schedule a family sooner than having a blocked schedule, to reschedule a family.
Awesome.
And Teresa's adding that it makes it much easier to get at a variety of routines.
Awesome. These are some benefits that I pulled out of research, but truthfully, I'd rather hear from you guys on what you enjoy about the flexible scheduling.
Nadine says it helps families see that we're involved in their routines and not just clinical, like a doctor appointment that they have to do. Katie says she likes it because it allows the family the opportunity to reflect on the best time to practice. Kay says it shakes things up.
It does help you get out of the monotony, I think. Absolutely, I like that one. What are some challenges that you guys run into? And if there's more benefits coming in, perfect.
Yeah, Casey says it might provide an opportunity to find an area of concern that parents didn't necessarily have, for example, meal times or picky eaters. Chloe says insight to family dynamics. If you go at the same time each time, you might not see certain things. And Mary Ellen, it helps families think outside the box for when and where we could meet. Megan McGee, it's nice to see kids during the variety of routines and times of the day. Megan McConaughey, scheduling joint visits can be tricky for support providers as a, you know, kind of con to it.
Awesome. Any challenges that you guys run into, or that you ran into, if you can remember, when you first started? So, you know, for those people who are just thinking about doing this, thinking about starting, what were some challenges?
Deirdre thinks children with multiple outside other therapies can be a challenge to schedule. Megan McGee, the family that just wants their kid to get as much therapy as possible and get those stretches in. Karen, some families have limited availability for visits. Chloe says parents' work schedules, they only want home visits at daycare. Megan McConaughey, parents who accommodate their schedule for those outside therapies, but not our program. Lori, Friday families get the worst time. Sometimes they let them schedule 2 times out so they get their best routine time in.
Yes, I do feel like families who need Friday, but you know, if the workday was 4 days a week, we would be, you know, Thursday families. Like, and if we only work 2 days a week, it'd be Tuesday families. So, yeah, whatever that last day of the work week is, that's tricky. So when you guys run into those challenges, what are some things you're doing to support the family, to support yourself? How are you guys navigating through the challenges? Because there are. It's definitely not. This is not a perfect, you know, utopia of scheduling. There are things that are difficult.
And do you mind if they jump in to say it rather than type it in?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
I've just been honest with my families and saying, you know, I'm going to try to be as flexible as I can be. And I would, you know, appreciate that reciprocity. And just knowing we're all juggling a lot of different things. And at the end of the day, my family's going to come first. I've just been very honest with my families. Not that I haven't gone out of my way to do things for families. I mean, early visits, late visits, it's kind of been all over the board lately, but that's going to change real quick in 2 weeks. When school starts, whatever that looks like. So I just been honest with my families and saying, hey, I'm going to be as flexible as I can be. And it, you know, and when you have that ability to be flexible, that's just really helpful for all of us.
This is Megan McGee. I feel like what ends up happening for me is, like, if a family wants a certain block time, I'll show up and the kid isn't the best version of themselves, and what the family's wanting to working on isn't working out, but it's the best for that family at that time. And so I feel like, you know, it takes a couple of times maybe for the family to see, like, wow, this isn't really the most ideal time for us to be working on this. And then it leads us down the path of, but this time would be better. So then we can try and work on that. So I feel like that's what I've been trying to do is, okay, if we want this 2 o'clock time, and like, well, I'm noticing that he's really tired during this visit. You know, I'm wondering if there's another time of day that we could maybe coordinate so we can, you did it 8 times. Okay, thanks, Abby. But so kind of just letting it naturally not fall apart in their face, but show them that maybe this wasn't the best plan for that. But then there's some families where, like, when they get home at 5:30 and it's chaotic and they want you to see dinner, it's all they've got. And, you know, you make do and hopefully maybe send some videos and try to do some coaching, you know, not live coaching, but coaching with the videos and reflecting on that. But that's kind of been my thing.
This is Mary Ellen. One of the things that I go to is when I'm struggling with a family to kind of get out of a rut of wanting to meet at the same time in the same scenario or activity, as we're saying. I just kind of go back to the IFSP and review the outcomes as to what they said they wanted to be working on, and try to tie that back into an activity in a way that would allow us a different time of day or a different activity, routine, opportunity to interact with. And it seems to kind of make sense to them and get them on board.
There's a comment from Susie that Now with the older kids being home from school, trying to figure out schedules when they can have visits is challenging, which is kind of what we were talking about challenges before. And Teresa's making a comment that it really begins with the IFSP meeting, laying down the groundwork on how services are provided and educating families about FAB scheduling from the start.
Yeah, there's so much of I totally agree, Teresa. There's so much, and thank you guys for sharing so much information to share at that IFSP meeting, and it's important to continue to review that. You know, knowing families not only are trying to hold all of that information about special education, but now on top of it, we're adding layers of home visit safety protocols and teletherapy intervention, and you know, it's not as clean, not that it was before, but it's not as clean as it used to be due to, you know, kind of what's going on in the world. So, you know, appreciate not only the honesty about, you know, sharing the celebrations, but also the challenges and how you guys are attempting to navigate those. Because again, you know, with what's going on with school, you know, for those of us who have kids at home, you know, God bless our souls as we try to navigate 2020 and supporting the families. So it's definitely going to be, I think, a year that lots of us have lots of opportunities to attempt to become more flexible and more forgiving. We should actually call it forgiving activity-based scheduling. But as we move on and kind of move forward into talking more about the dosage and the frequency, you know, again, just thinking about if you are at that point where you're wanting to try, you know, one of the things they recommend is just kind of wiping your schedule, you know, clean, and then really just starting to, when you're there at that next visit, just scheduling one visit out, one visit out, one visit out. And one of the pieces that I think that you guys do such a great job of supporting one another on are that connection and being honest about what worked for you, what was hard for you. So if you're at a point where you're at a roadblock, you know, talk to some other teammates who are having success with this. And again, just, you know, gathering data on how you can support yourself. And I will say, you know, continue to allow yourself a lot of grace, because doing something as big as addressing scheduling is a nightmare. And truthfully, no matter what job I had, scheduling was always really the most difficult part, whether it was hospital, school district, early intervention visits, whatever that might look like. Scheduling is and can be really tricky. So again, offer yourself a lot of grace, because you're all doing fabulous. Did you guys see what I did there? I can only see Stacy's face, so if she's smiling, I know that it was funny. I'm gonna go with that. So let's roll into dosage. Dosage, AKA all sorts of different words, and there is no standard definition of dosage. Dosage was something that I had heard for the first time in December. That wasn't a term I was familiar with. I'm familiar with frequency, intensity, length, duration, you know, all of these other more traditional terms. But one of the pieces that they're talking about in early intervention is looking at dosage, almost like vitamins or medicine, where you might have a standard dose at certain points, but when something changes and something happens, that dose might increase. Or if things are going really, really well, maybe that dosage decreases. So again, you know, whatever term you want to use, I'm okay saying frequency. I know at one point in Johnson County, we did not say that word. That was like the F word. However, I don't feel like that's really, we don't need to not say that word, because it is. You guys have to establish how often you're going, and that is definitely a piece of what that IFSP looks like. So when we look at all of these things, you know, I think the bottom line, what we need to always keep in our minds, if we can, is that we really want to look at what is the minimum amount of time that a child and a family need from us to be able to make progress towards their IFSP outcomes. You know, I think that is our goal, and that's definitely, I think, what we tried to embrace in 2010 when we first started, as we were melding into this model. So I think that you guys have done a really nice job of being mindful about what that service looks like. And again, fast forward, 10 years, we've got some more information on what this looks like, some more data, looking at, just some clinic-based services, how often clinics are providing services. You guys can see the different services between OTs, PTs, and speech. So when you're looking at a center-based service model, that looks drastically different than it does in early intervention. The minutes, not so much. The visits at OT, PT are about an hour. Speech visits are a little bit longer, probably because we talk too much, and so we just need more time. I think we like to talk. But thinking about and flip-flopping that to looking at, okay, what are we doing in early intervention, and what does that look like? One of the key pieces as we move forward, they have been doing some nice data collection across the nation. On average, children are getting a little under an hour a week of early intervention, and this has been decreasing over the years. And so, 15 years ago, that number was higher. I think, again, as we have tried to provide services under the model of not only the primary service provider model, but looking at the key principles of early intervention. And we know that having 4 different therapists in the home at 4 different times, hold on a second. Sorry, I'm at the lake with Audrey, and she's getting a Mr. Freezy, and the plastic is wigging me out. And I can't even remember what I was saying. My mom always said, if you can't remember, it must have been a lie. But thinking about,
multiple therapies at once.
Yeah, so when you've got, and that follows the key principles of early intervention. When you've got 4 different people going in at 4 different times, there's no overlap, that doesn't look like what's best practice for early intervention. And you can read through, ASHA, the AOTA, APTA, even our big therapy organizations, they all talk about what we're doing and how we're providing services in terms of having that team lead or that primary service provider. That definitely is how we should be providing services. So kind of transitioning to thinking about our partner programs. This was a big takeaway for me, truthfully, in December, and then Melissa had revisited this also in February at KDEC. But, when we think about our other programs that are working with children from birth through age 3, and thinking about how they're providing services and how much, I think that there's a little bit of a discrepancy at points in time. One of the biggest takeaways for me was thinking about Early Head Start, which is a program for children who are at risk, and they provide at minimum 90 minutes a week. We're working with children who've been identified as having developmental delays. They're not at risk. They already have it, as Melissa said. And so when we're providing, less than an hour a week to children who do have a developmental delay, who do have a medical condition that has been identified as impactful, when you guys are using clinical judgment because you're noticing things that aren't typical, what does that look like for those children who, and I misspelled children, but what does that look like for the children in early intervention versus our children who are at risk through Early Head Start? For those of you that have taken Hannon, they definitely provide a pretty intense burst of service, front loading, if you look at it, depending on the term that you like, where they're providing, 2 hours a week sometimes of both group sessions and individual sessions. The Play Project and the Rainbow Project, I don't know much about, truthfully, so I put websites on there if you guys wanted to read more. But again, looking at those particular programs, they're providing similar amounts, about an hour a week or so. And then even parents as teachers, they're going in 1 time a month, sometimes 2 times a month. Their criteria has changed. So if they have a family who has a lot of risk factors, they're able to go in multiple times a month as well. And parents as teachers is, again, a program designed not for children with developmental delays, but really to support parents who have children who are typically developing, and then reaching out to programs such as ours when something comes up. So again, I found that just interesting as we think about how much services we're providing. And again, not that we're providing too much or too little, but just kind of where the data stands when you look at it across the programs. One of the other pieces that Melissa had talked about was there are 2 states actually who have mandated minimums, and I didn't know this. And interestingly enough, which I'm sure wouldn't surprise you guys, but this isn't driven by anyone else other than politicians and state legislators. And I'm super glad, obviously, that I don't live in either of these states. Because this isn't driven by the family's needs, and it's not driven by your professional knowledge, but rather it's driven by politics and so just so you guys are aware of that, Michigan and Texas are the 2 states at this point in time who do have mandated minimums for families to receive early intervention. Again, I don't know how that's individualized, but nobody asked me. So thinking about, some child and family factors, these are our more traditional pieces that we think about when we're going into talking about what services look like. So, if you have a child who's older, maybe close to that 2.5-year-old age when they start the program, when they start early intervention, that might be a family that you're going to see pretty frequently, because not only have we don't have the time with that family that we did if the child had entered our program at birth, but you've also got your transition pieces in place as well. Looking at the gestational age of the child, the prematurity factors, obviously looking at their developmental skills, but thinking about their access to healthcare, whether that's through private insurance, through Medicaid. Even accessing services looks different in rural settings versus urban versus suburban. And even truthfully right now, you have Wyandotte County Infant Toddler Program, they're attached to the KCK district. And because that's their lead agent, KCK is saying you cannot do any home visits until at least November. So no family who resides in Wyandotte County has been able to get an in-person, face-to-face visit since March. And that's tricky because they have a lot of families who are disengaging from teletherapy. Your rural areas as well, teletherapy has been tricky just because some of the rural areas, they don't even have cell service. So to have a connection at this point that's stable is really hard as well. So lots of different factors, I think, that go into accessing early intervention. But then you're also looking at, those family risk factors. You're looking at, is there domestic violence? Is there, concerns for neglect or abuse? Parents who are young, that's definitely a concern to take into place, as well as any mental health issues that the parent has shared with us. And then ultimately, really, services need to be driven by the IFSP outcomes that the family has identified. Are there other factors other than these that you guys feel you weigh into at this point when you're talking about services with families?
So Megan McConaughey says the family schedule. I was kind of thinking the same thing, and not always the best thing to think about, but sometimes the family's just saying, we have so much going on, I can only do this a certain amount of times.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that definitely, truthfully, Megan, I'm glad that you said the family schedule and not your schedule, because, that, that's tricky. And hopefully we're not at that point where, you know, our schedules are impacting services they shouldn't. But I think the family's availability, truthfully, that's always, you know, a question. You know, right now, and I kind of wanted to pose this to you guys, and again, feel free to talk. You don't have to write in the chat, but you know, right now, I think when we get to that conversation about services, we ask a family, you know, how much support do you feel like you're going to need between now and, you know, February? And thinking about this at your initial IFSP meetings. And one of the questions that I really wanted to try and talk about today, again, as much as we can, but what are some underlying biases when we're asking families that question? How is this question loaded and potentially detrimental to certain families?
Might make them feel like they don't know what they need or what they want.
Mm-hmm.
That they're not quite good enough to do it on their own.
Monica, it's Megan. I had a dad this week share with me. He was like, if you were in a tragic accident and you couldn't move your body and your brain was massively impacted, and they said to you they were only going to offer you 30 minutes a week of physical therapy, would you think that's enough? And and he wasn't talking about our program, but so I feel like when we ask families sometimes, how much support do you think you need? They're thinking, my kid is medically fragile. I need as much support as I could possibly get. When can you be here? Tomorrow, the next day, the next day. So I think that sometimes it's a loaded question in the sense that in our bias, we're like, gosh, I hope I can meet your needs with my scheduling. And for them, they're like, I need everything, because this wasn't in my plan for my kid to fall down the stairs or be born with a traumatic brain injury or a diagnosis of something. So that was just a really powerful statement this week. But he was also very heated. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, Lori and Megan, those are great points, things to think about. You know, I also wonder, you know, what does this question look like when we ask a family who understands the importance of early intervention and has education and background versus when we ask a family maybe who's immigrated here and culturally, you know, is new to the United States? Like, what does this question look like for families that have that background, that either that base knowledge or the lack of base knowledge? And is this a fair question to even ask a family when they don't even know what it is we're going to be doing moving forward?
That matches a couple of the comments Kelly and Megan say. The families really sometimes have no idea how to answer. And Megan's adding, and sometimes they're already feeling guilty about not doing enough. And then Susie is saying it's tricky when a child has a lot of needs, but the family only says once a month is fine. But on the other hand, if it's like an auto qualifier that's doing pretty well, but the family still wants a lot of support.
Mm-hmm.
Monica, this is Angie. I think my most difficult times with IFSPs is planning for multiple services for kids that have multiple needs, and parents are thinking about, and I know from how we were taught, like you're kind of focusing on like one route, like an activity at a time, but like they're worried about feeding, they're worried about communication. And I feel like I'm like divvying up, like, well, one week someone will come with me, another week someone else. And it is like, I mean, like it gives me anxiety trying to schedule everyone and feel like I'm meeting their needs. And I always feel like I'm falling short or not giving them what they need when I'm kind of following this blanket once a week, but everyone else in the picture, it's really not that. So I'm thinking about that because I've got several IFSPs with multiple providers right now that I'm doing, and I'm like, so that was my dream. Sorry.
No, I'm glad that you said that, Angie, because I think that's important. And I think that, again, when a family's starting a program like ours, it looks very, very different than a clinic-based setting. And so, you know, I don't even think this is a fair question to ask a family who that they don't know what we're going to be doing. They don't understand that coaching process yet. So what I really, really liked about what information was shared in December and February was that really that first, 3 to 6 months of services, I think we need to consider the possibility of front loading. I think the way that we understood it 10 years ago, we'll come weekly for a month or two and then we'll decrease to every other week. But really they're saying that front loading period needs to last, 3 to 6 months. And on average, visits should not be any longer than 9 to 10 days apart. Again, think first 6 months of service. And again, just allow yourself to absorb information. But, like you guys were talking about, those children who have, lots of medical conditions, lots of appointments, lots of therapists, should those be, visits we're scheduling more often, expecting cancellations versus maybe scheduling once a month and that one visit gets canceled. So, that would be something to think about too. Thinking again, we've talked about if kids are older when they enroll, those are families that may need, not they do, but they may need more visits just because we have less time with them. And then also if if a child has a delay, but there's not a known reason, chances might be that you need to support that family more often as they're processing through what that unknown is. So one of the pieces, again, and I think that's kind of what we're looking for is some hardcore data and what, again, Dathan Melissa, Carl Duntz, Mary Beth Bruder, Robin McWilliams, we're talking, all of our gurus of early intervention that are at that, federal level. They're saying really an average of 3 times a month would be the minimum that they would recommend, and even the possibility of doing more visits than that. So one of the things that Dathan and Melissa have created is they're collecting more data. They have actually created, now bear with me here, it's a worksheet and it's an Excel sheet that literally has formulas put in to it that would allow you to plug in different factors and plug in different information that would give you a recommended dosage to start. They are at the point where they're really just trialing this out with programs just to kind of see what this is looking like. But if any of you guys had a family that, whether it was a new family or a current family that you would be comfortable talking through the group right now, we can plug in some information and then this will give us an estimate of what these recommended services look like just for the first 3 to 6 months. After that point in time, they're saying families are aware of the services and they know what it looks like. So then that question, how much support do you need in the next 6 months? That's a great question to ask after the family's had experience with our program and you have been able to work through some of these things. Like Angie's trying to work magic with 1 visit a week. Well, maybe Angie needs, not that you want to do this, but maybe Angie needs 3 visits a week with a particular family, at least to start off. So I don't know if I have any takers.
Megan McConaughey wants to nominate someone who's from the faction of data or organization.
Ooh, way to go. Way to pull in some previous Lunch and Learn information. That would be Nikki, Amy, Molly. It's a small group, and I know who you are. I feel like there's Erica. You were in that group. Is that it?
I would say this is up my alley.
And Jana, I don't know if anyone else cannot see your screen, but Jana can't see what you're sharing.
Well, that's sad, Jana. Let me try again. Share screen. Can you see it now? It's a Excel sheet. Nikki,
can this Monica Ross has started sharing her screen, but there's nothing there. That's all right. Somebody can send it to me.
Yeah, I would just, with that being said, like I like that. I would be curious, just to kind of go through it in my head with a family and see what it recommends. And because I would say, I feel like kind of exactly what you're saying. Like, I feel like when you ask families how much they're needing when they've never done this before is so difficult. So sometimes I'll try to offer some guidance. Like I feel like if we have that we've written a lot of outcomes that we're going to be working on, that we feel like, oh my gosh, if we're just coming every other week, like it's going to take us a while to get through these, or it might be a month before we can address this one outcome, that we might start, more frequently just to feel like we can get going. But I would be curious, plugging this in because I do feel like sometimes you hit a point with families that once you've covered the outcomes and now it's just we're practicing and giving the child time, that it naturally happens where families are like, okay, we got this. We just need to keep, we need to keep plugging along. We just need to give more time. And so I feel like it naturally happens that they're like, oh, can you just come in a couple of weeks? And a lot of times that frequency decreases more quickly than I anticipate, but I would like to fill this out and just see what it recommends and what my thoughts are on it.
And Megan has a comment that some of the questions she's not sure how to know what the answers would be because they're not typically a part of the conversation that she would have, like maternal age or maternal education level, stuff like that.
Yeah, and if we can kind of just run through it. I'll just use, I don't know, I'll pretend to use me. So if I were answering this, let's say Audrey was little, we've got, Eric and I are divorced. So I would say visits would need to happen in 2 different places. The nice part is a lot of these are drop-down menus. So you don't really have to do a lot of figuring. It's more of just, again, an estimator. The distance of the caregivers from the program office, I truthfully have no idea what that has, but in Johnson County, it's pretty much going to be less than 45 minutes. So family teacher, let's say Audrey has 3 outcomes. Maternal age, less than 16, more than 16. Again, that might be a question we don't want to assume because of bias, but some of this information, again, if you're comfortable going through and asking, some of it you might already know. High school diploma, do I have any ongoing conditions? I feel like I do, but I'm going to say no.
Monica, I will, if you don't want to do it on you, I have a kid I could do it with.
Okay, let's do it on your kid real quick.
Okay, so right now we're the same. Everything's good.
Okay, cool.
Does a child or family have, I don't know, but I don't know about ACEs.
Okay, we'll put no because we don't want to assume anything.
Okay, do the caregivers have experience with prior non-connectional services? No.
Okay, so that would be services in our program. Does the caregiver demonstrate lack of confidence or competence in the use of responsive strategies?
Yes, that's what I'm there to teach them.
Okay.
That would be my answer. Well, and I don't know if it's right, but that's what I would answer.
Okay. And that's it. Those are all the questions. So you can see it spits out right here, Lori, an average of 3 times a month. And so that's what the dosage estimator would recommend in terms of just those factors alone. Wait, no, that's a lie. Sorry, we forgot to answer the one about the child. Hold that thought. Okay, how many children are enrolled in the program?
1.
Okay. What was the physician prescription?
No prescription.
Okay.
18 months.
Okay.
4.
Okay.
I don't know the cause.
Is the cause Is it unknown? Yes, so it's unknown. Okay.
Okay, sorry. No. 3 at least.
Okay. And then what is the number of existing opportunities for child engagement in everyday activity setting?
Oh, more than 7. I mean, this is a great family.
Okay. So now, based on all of the information, not just half of it, sorry there, guys, looking at family and other caregivers and looking at the child, for the first 3 to 6 months of intervention, these factors considered would say, you know, this would be a family where, you know, if they were to say to you, well, how many times do you think you should come out? This would be where you may consider recommending professionally, you know, based on everything we've talked about, based on, you know, your IFSP outcomes, where your child is, the things to work on. You know, I would start off once a week, you know, and see how that feels. How does that sound for you? So again, you know, we're not telling the family you have to have once a week, but this might give you guys a framework of where and how to have that starting off discussion based on information.
I still see him weekly, and I've been there for 6 months, and they still request weekly because he changed a lot, and he's getting private speech, and they want me to come teach them how to make the private speech work with their activities at home.
Mm-hmm. Good. I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. And you know, and this would be something to where, you know, as a program, I'm not saying we're going to start using this, but I would say if you're interested and even, you know, I can email this to you, and you can even look at your current caseload, and you can even fill this out based on the families that you're currently working with, and look and see what those IFSP services looked like at the start, again, for the first 3 to 6 months. So just some data. So if you guys would want to type your name in the chat box, Stacy doesn't know this, but she's gonna make a list of everybody for me. And then she will send me that list, and I'll email this to you. And again, just a way for us to start taking some data on how close we are to what it might be recommended. But I think the most important thing is thinking about too, and the families have to want the services. They have to want you to come once a week, or twice a week, or 3 times a week. And if they don't, then that's okay too. You know, we definitely want to work with where the family is. This is hopefully just giving you guys, especially those who like data, you know, another possible way to look at this. And what FIP, what Dathan and Melissa, in combination with DEC, are trying to do is gather data from around the country to figure out if they can make some recommendations on what services for the first 3 to 6 months look like, because a lot of factors are unknown and uncontrollable in home visiting, as you guys all very well know. This might be an outline of something that we could use as a tool. Again, going back to what do services look like after that first 3 to 6 months. So, you know, some of the factors that you guys are going to look at are, you know, how much progress has been made towards IFSP outcomes. What are ongoing factors? What are new factors that have come up? Has there been a divorce? Has there been a change in child care? Did you initially write 24 visits on the initial IFSP, but you only completed 6? And so, you know, again, all of these different factors, you guys have naturally already so much data going into that IFSP review 6 months later that you use and really look at. It's that you don't have the data and the support now planning what those initial services look like. So again, that question that we're asking families, you know, I don't want a family who doesn't understand the importance of early intervention to say once a month and only get once a month, when we have families who are maybe more educated and asking for weekly services. And so we give that family weekly because they've asked. I want all families, regardless of education, culture, ethnicity. I would love for all of those to be wiped and for us to be able to start with a fresh slate with every family. And so every family is getting the same opportunity. And that's hard. It's really, really hard to do. But, you know, another thing that they talked about was this, if the primary service provider has changed, you know, that might be an opportunity to do another burst of service. So you get to know that family and you get to build that relationship. So maybe instead of me passing off a family to Molly, and I was only going in once a month, maybe Molly wants to go, you know, every week for a month or two so she can get to know that family. And so again, that would be an opportunity to look at a burst of service as well. And I think that that's where I feel like the term front loading, it has a little bias because it does imply the beginning of services, the initial IFSP, but really understanding that all of these different factors listed could be a reason that you might want to increase services again for an amount of time. I know I've gone over my time boundary. I was supposed to be done. At 1, but just one thing, you know, left for you guys to think about. Melissa had a fantastic example, I thought, and she had talked about how one of her staff, when she was in North Carolina, would ask a family, so how many times would you like to practice this before I come back? Which I think is a different question than, how many times, how many days do you want to wait till I come back? And the example that she gave too is, and this is something I think is really good, again, just to hold, but for the example she gave was, if you're working with a child care provider, you're working with a parent, and you wrap up that session and you don't feel like the mom or the caregiver quite has that strategy down, but it's time to go. And so you're looking at the family decides to practice during meal times, and they're practicing a strategy that either mom doesn't quite feel comfortable with, or you don't feel quite comfortable with that mom has that down pat. But if you schedule a visit a week later, think about how many times that family in a week is going to practice mealtime incorrectly. If they're having 3 meals a day and 2 snacks, that's 5 meals a day times 7 days before the next visit. That family has practiced this strategy incorrectly 35 times by the time you come back. And so what do you have to undo after 35 times of incorrectly practicing? And so again, would that be a family where you might, want to come back 2 days later just to make sure that the mealtime strategy is being implemented in a way that benefits the family and that you don't have to undo things? Because we know once we learn something as adults, we can't unlearn it. We're incapable. And plus, on top of the pandemic, we have so much that we're thinking about. So that is, I loved that concrete example. And that wasn't something I had really thought about before. But I liked how she outlined that, because I think that gives us pause enough to think about, okay, are we supporting families in a way that does benefit them for implementation of whatever strategy you're doing, but so they're also doing it in a way that isn't harmful, if that makes sense. Okay, so last is resources. I do have all of this up. Information, I've got everything in the folder. If you go to the FTP folder and you look in the Lunch and Learn folder, you can go to handouts and you will see different handouts for different lunch and learns we've had. I've got a bunch of resources in here for our FAB scheduling and dosage conversation. I'll put this PowerPoint in there as well. But if you're interested in a CEU certificate, it is right here. So you can grab that, as well as any other CEU certificates that you may have missed. I believe they're all up in there, so you guys can just pull them out as you want. So I apologize for going over. Thank you for helping facilitate. For those of you who've requested and are interested in using that dosage estimator, I will definitely email it to you. Let me know if you have questions, and thank you for coming with an open mind and helping us look at how we can do things differently if we need to. Maybe we don't, which would be lovely. Yes, and I'm at the lake. I'm sure you could tell.